Could everyone work towards grabbing a seat, please? Thank you. Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Andrews. I direct the Virginia Coastal Policy Center at William & Mary Law School, and we're extremely pleased to have you with us this morning. And first off, I'm going to introduce our president of William & Mary, Catherine Rowe. She is our 28th president, and we are proud to say our first woman president. She's nationally recognized as an innovator in higher education, an out-of-the-box thinker who launched a series of university-wide discussions this year called Thinking Forward. So she's the perfect person to open our conference addressing present and future challenges such as climate change and sea level rise. Please join me in welcoming President Rowe.
Thank you, Director Andrews. Thank you to all of you in this room here today. On behalf of William & Mary, it is my very great pleasure to welcome you to the 7th Annual Virginia Coastal Policy Center Fall Conference. William & Mary is grateful to convene this group, a group of experts who span an extraordinarily wide range of sectors: academia, government and nonprofits, the business and banking communities, to tackle some of the most pressing policy questions that face us today. Here in Williamsburg, as you all know, we are in an estuary. We are an estuarine campus. I say that because it sounds way classier than saying we're a swamp. But as we know, marshes, swamps, estuaries are the most vulnerable and most active places where we are engaging with the effects of climate change today. William & Mary has an imperative to lead in finding innovative solutions and cultivating best practices to address rising sea levels, and the number one best practice is partnership, collaboration, consortial effort of the kind that this room makes possible. We have an extraordinary body of research at William & Mary spanning our distinctive programs in the liberal arts and sciences and professional studies. I'll name just a few because it's such a source of pride for me, and it was a strong reason for me to come here to William & Mary to lead this institution. Through the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, in collaboration with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and their other partners, we're providing comprehensive science-based legal and policy analysis. And as a university, we're committed to doing much more. We're in a year of strategic planning right now, thinking in a sustained way about how conservation and resiliency must inform our future and what kind of an impact in those arenas William & Mary can have. So we're so grateful for the brain trust assembled in this room. Among the leaders joining us today are Rear Admiral Ann Phillips. Thank you so much. We welcome you here, Madam. The Governor's Special Assistant for Coastal Adaptation and Protection, as well as Virginia's Secretary of Natural Resources, Matt Strickler, who also serves as the Chief Resilience Officer of our Commonwealth. And we're excited to have representatives from multiple states along the East Coast: Massachusetts, my home state, Rhode Island, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. This gathering is such an important reminder that sea level rise is a shared challenge that knows no political boundaries. In fact, political boundaries just don't make sense in the context of effects that were felt all along our country's borders with the ocean. This gathering is therefore an important reminder that our work is strengthened by collaboration, by communication, and by public-private partnerships. Everything that we can do consortially is what will matter in the next decade. So thank you all so much for joining us. We look forward to working together to explore new methods, to identify and elevate best practices. I'm waiting to hear what you think William & Mary, with our partners, needs to be doing in the decade ahead. Thank you. Now I'm pleased to invite Dr. Davidson Douglas, Dean of the William & Mary Law School, to the podium. Thank you, Dave.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I was thinking this morning, reflecting back on the beginning of this project. It was probably about 10 years ago. And we were talking about the importance of of climate change and how this was going to affect our community in this area. And we said, you know, we should do something about it here at the law school in conjunction with the School of Marine Science. And so out of an early conversation 7 or 8 years ago began what is here today. The beginning of this idea actually, in significant measure, was this generation of students are incredibly interested in climate change related issues. And so when we took this up the flagpole and said, should we invest at the law school in a project like this, it became an easy yes, that we should. To that end, I want to say to you, all of you who are here today, there are a number of students here. They are very passionate about this work. And I hope and some of them checked you in and gave you a name tag, I hope over the course of the day that if you see a student, go up and ask them about the work that they're doing. Because what they are doing is policy work. Now in law schools, you think about law schools, well, they must be doing litigation. They must be doing something to do directly with the courts. That's not what our Coastal Policy Center does. These students are engaged in public policy issues that are so vital today. So again, I hope you'll engage with our students. They are really fired up about being here today. This is the 7th year in a row that we have become a convener of these kinds of conversations. We love that role. We love the fact that we can be a part of bringing this group of people with the expertise that you bring together and help us drive forward in very positive ways how we deal with these issues. So thank you so much for being here. We love that you're here. This is an important part of our work at William & Mary and at William & Mary Law School. This is going to be a very productive day, and we're just glad to have a small part of it. So thank you. I hope this is rich conversation, and we look forward to a wonderful full day. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you both very much for the welcoming remarks. We appreciate you being with us this morning. And thank you all for being with us here today for our 7th annual conference. Hard to believe. This event has been building in momentum and attendance over the years, and we are honored to host these discussions. We couldn't have done it without our friends and partners that are here today and our sponsors. Please, if you see representatives of these organizations today, please give them a big handshake and a thank you. Thanks to them, you had your coffee this morning, and you have this wonderful interstate, interdisciplinary dialogue. So please thank all of our sponsors. We have a distinguished list of keynote speakers with us today. As President Rowe mentioned, we have Secretary of Natural Resources Matt Strickler joining us, Admiral Ann Phillips, who's the Special Assistant to the Governor for Coastal Adaptation and Protection. We also have Leonard Jones, Managing Director for Public Finance for Moody's up in New York, who's joining us today. Thank you. And Dr. Molly Mitchell from VIMS spoke to us this morning at the wine breakfast. And so we appreciate all of you joining us today. Thank you. This conference actually is a part of a series of events that we have been hosting to support resilience planning at the state and the local level. At last year's conference, many of you will recall that Dr. Carl Hirschner and his staff at VIMS did important research that they presented on the impacts of climate change on our septic systems, our natural resources, our transportation infrastructure, and VCPC provided some policy analysis to support that. The data showed the crucial need to plan for climate change impacting in these areas. We also hosted representatives of the Pamunkey tribe because we're trying to help them as much as we can in their efforts to make their reservation more resilient. And we were really proud to host the governor in signing his executive order establishing the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan and other measures at the state level that the state government's undertaking. This past spring, with the invaluable assistance of Admiral Phillips and David Johnson, who's with us today as a moderator, and Mike Sapner from TransRe Reinsurance Company, we hosted a resilience funding forum to showcase to our local governments and to our state agencies these alternative methods for funding resilience measures, such as parametric insurance and catastrophe bonds. And we partnered with the PDCs, the Planning District Commissions around the Chesapeake Bay region, to try to invite the local government staff and elected officials to the event to make sure that they got the information. But as a follow-up, we're also taking the information to them. We are hosting some workshops with our PDC partners to bring specialists from Quantified Ventures, which helps with environmental impact bonds, and parametric insurance company New Paradigm, Standard & Poor's, and Admiral Phillips to give them an update on the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, bringing the information to them. In addition to these events, we're very proud to to partner with our friends at ODU. Michelle Covey is here today. Raise your hand, Michelle. There you are. And Tanya Denkla-Cobb and her staff at UVA, at the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation, to do the RAFT project. Hopefully many of you all have heard about it. A student team will tell you more about it at lunchtime. It's the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool, and it's a scorecard and then a follow-up program to assist our localities in becoming more resilient. We're very proud that we are trying to fill that gap and work in particular with rural localities where needs are great and resources are few, and trying to highlight in our scorecard effort the need to address the needs of our socially and physically vulnerable communities. So, each step of the way, our goal has been to engage in dialogue and to provide legal and policy analysis to support resilience efforts in our communities. Thank you to all of you who've been speakers and attendees and sponsors and partners who have helped us through these years along the way. And today, that brings us today to these panels that we put together with specialists from throughout the East Coast to talk to you about their lessons learned, focusing on the 3 Ps of resilience, which is planning, partnerships, and paying for it all. These are the questions that come up again and again. And in these discussions, we notice there's so often government and academia and nonprofits at the table, but not so much the voice of the business community, the private sector. So we've got you here today. We have a banking panel, and we have a business panel. And we truly appreciate the efforts of David Johnson and Dennis Tracy, our moderators, to help us put together such dynamic panels today. Please take advantage of all of the brain power in this room. As President Rose said, we're all together. We're going to have some breaks for you all during the morning and the afternoon, and lunch down the hall in a room that's, by the way, right next to the restrooms, which are out in the hall right out there. And so you'll have plenty of opportunity to mingle, and then at the end of the day, we will have a reception for more mingling and questions for our speakers. I also want to recognize Senator Monty Mason, who's in the back of the room, and we're hoping to have some other legislators join us today throughout the day. I have to give some special thanks to our VCPC fellows who are here today. Could you raise your hands? Or they might be at the registration table, actually. They're the ones doing all the wonderful, non-sexy work in the background. Connor Jennings, Jessica Kraus, Anthony Cusato, and Alston Underwood. Our new postgraduate fellow, Jesse Reiblick, please go up and say hi to him. That's a brand new program that we have a 3-year postgraduate fellow. We're very excited. Especially my assistant director, Angela King, without whom this would not happen. Let's give her a hand because she did all the details behind the scenes. Thank you, Angela. And our terrific VCPC students who will be talking to you at lunchtime about the projects that they're doing this semester, and we're truly excited about their wonderful projects. So with that, it's my honor to introduce Admiral Phillips, Special Assistant to the Governor. And prior to this position, Ann worked to address sea level rise and climate change at the state, national, international level. We're truly lucky to have her here in Virginia. Many of us know her from her excellent work with the Intergovernmental Pilot Project in Hampton Roads, where she chaired the Infrastructure Working Group. She is an expert in this arena and, incidentally, a delight to work with. She served nearly 31 years on active duty in the U.S. Navy, and now she's fighting a war on flooding for all of us. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Phillips.
A former city manager in a Hampton Roads city did declare war on flooding at one point not that long ago. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. President Rowe, thank you for your remarks and for your support of this effort and these kinds of collaborative efforts, which are so important. Dean Douglas, thank you also for your presence. As always, it adds value to and gravity to this kind of event. And of course, to my friend and colleague, Director Elizabeth Andrews, for all that she does to put this together. This is months and months and months of work and phone calls and collaboration and strategy. And basically, you have to invite people and you have to convince them that it's worth their time. And that is what Elizabeth has done. And in that context, especially with the group that we have here for you today, really raised the bar for the kinds of information that you're going to get, and certainly the quality of the speakers here and the people that are in the room as guests are exceptional. Thank you also to Senator Mason for joining us. Sir, I see you there in the back. We do expect other delegates and senators later on in the day, we hope. This is the 7th annual Coastal Policy Center Conference, I think. And again, the topic are the 3 Ps of resilience: planning, partnerships, and paying for it all. I also had the opportunity to open last year's conference, and at that time I had been the special assistant to the governor for exactly 1 month. And I spoke about actions and activities that had taken place across the coastal regions of Virginia. Today, I'd like to share a bit about what we've been able to accomplish over the past year, and of course, what remains to be done. We accomplished this, we'll talk about it. This is what remains. If that looks like a Papa Shark, you're right. For those of you who might be fans of the Nationals. As Elizabeth mentioned, we are about providing information to those who need it, to localities, to planning districts, to regional commissions, businesses, and communities. Last year, we focused on building a resilient Virginia. This year, we want to talk about partnerships and how to move forward in that context. At the end of the day last year, most importantly, some of you might have forgotten this, we were joined by Governor Ralph Northam, who signed Executive Order 24, increasing Virginia's resilience to sea level rise and natural hazards. He called it Virginia's roadmap to make our built environment more resilient to floods, hurricanes, fires, and extreme weather events. Since then, we've been focused on implementing that executive order across 3 fronts. First, to set statewide standards to reduce the vulnerability of state-owned buildings, and as a teaser, you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Second, to develop a coastal resilience master plan for the state of Virginia, which will highlight and draw from the actions of the 8 coastal planning districts and regional commissions to develop a coordinated planning process based on their current, future, and projected actions, needs, and identified gaps. We're still working on that. We're going to keep working on it, and we plan to have phase 1 completed early next spring. Finally, the third part of the executive order is to focus on things you've already heard mentioned this morning: communication, coordination, and collaboration across state, federal, community, and local partners, stakeholders at all levels. As we've worked through our priorities on the master plan, we've come up with 4 key items to think about. The first is the use of natural and nature-based features as a first line of defense. This buys us time, it buys communities time, it buys property owners time as we determine what infrastructure is critical and vulnerable and what our next steps will be. We're also focused on collaborative efforts across regions, communities, localities. Gone are the stovepipe studies, one city at a time with federal dollars. We need to collaborate. The water knows no boundaries here, and at best, we should be thinking watershed, not political boundary. You've already heard that this morning too. You'll hear more about it later today. We're also focused on environmental equity. We as the Commonwealth have a responsibility to care for our residents, our communities, our homeowners, our businesses, and when you look at the way federal grant processes and structures are presented, they are offering the capacity for those who already have capacity to help themselves to continue to help themselves. Those who do not have the capacity to help themselves lose out. Study after study after study reports this. Dr. A.R. Siders from the University of Delaware just released one earlier this week. It's about the state of North Carolina, but it makes the same point. Those who have the capacity to help themselves get the help. We have to drive equity for all in Virginia. To do that, Governor Northam has signed Executive Order 29, establishing the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice, who will assist in part with this effort. We've also worked on planning across a number of other federal agencies and working with them as we try to move forward here: DOD, NOAA, NASA, EPA, all agencies that actually want to try to help at their agency level and make progress in the state of Virginia, and we're grateful for that. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a couple of things. First, a lot of things that are coastal, which is what I'm focused on, turn out to be statewide needs as well. There's a need for statewide predictive rainfall data. There's a need for statewide predictive floodplain data. There's a need for a statewide riverine and coastal gauge system. We have a part of this in place, but it is not statewide, and it needs support, help, and expansion. There's also a need for a statewide resilience plan, which we do not yet have here in Virginia. And there's a need for statewide, consistent, and dedicated funding to help localities address these issues now and in the future. I'd also like to point out some people who have been tremendously helpful over the past year, as Elizabeth has just done. Thank you. First of all, as you are aware, this position did not come with a staff or a budget. Yes, I have access across the full governor's staff, but there's a difference between they actually work for you and you have to convince them to help you. Those two things don't necessarily go together. However, with the support of the Virginia Sea Grant, the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, and William & Mary Whole of Government Center, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, along with Secretary Strickler's support there, I have had a series and have a series of fellows assisting me. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling you out. You've been warned. First of all, I have a Sea Grant fellow who will be with me for a year, Ben Nettleton, who also did a full year with the Eastern Shore, on the Nature Conservancy on the Eastern Shore. And as a detailee from DCR, Ms. Emmeline Skates has come up to help us for 6 months. Emmy wanted to try something new and different, and so she has gotten a waterfall approach to new and different. So thanks to both of you. I also have 2 VCPC and Whole of Government fellows helping me this semester. Second-year law student Ryan Franklin, and MBA Mason School first-year student Leon Fields, also here today. I'm a Mason School alum, so Leon has to listen to my reminiscing all the time, and he's very gracious about it. Thank you, Leon. I also have some previous Sea Grant fellows who've been tremendously helpful, and I will name them also. Leslie Morton and Sasha Brower, who helped me spring of 2019, and 2 summer full-time fellows, Annabeth Lawler and Shuri Zhang, both from UVA. They made tremendous contributions, and without them, we would not be as far as we are. Thank you to all of them. I'd also like to thank the Commonwealth Center for Recurrent Flooding Resilience, VIMS, the Virginia Coastal Policy Center, and Old Dominion University, who have been tremendously helpful over the past year, again, Virginia Sea Grant, and the nonprofit Wetlands Watch for the continued assistance and support. I do a lot of outreach. That's a big part of this job. You need to bring in collaboration or we're not going to make any progress here. And so in that context, I do a lot of talking to people and a lot of listening to people. And here's what they have to say. There are some shortcomings, and they're pretty common across everyone. Capacity, the capacity to plan, to collect data, to evaluate that data, to do research, to write grant proposals, to collaborate, to plan, particularly when it comes to implementing the National Flood Insurance Program and the community rating system. Lots of interest, not much capacity. Not enough time, not enough staff. Authorities. Localities want to be able to set standards adjacent to floodplains. They want to tighten zoning regulations. In some cases, they want to strengthen building codes or design standards to make their communities more resilient. But they're very concerned about doing this without state support and state standards, which you'll hear about in a few minutes. And money. Money at every turn, money. I had a county executive look me in the eye a couple of weeks ago and say, the state needs to help us. We only have property taxes. We're a rural district. We can't do it on our own. This isn't a big surprise here, but some localities have capacity in that regard, but many, many others do not. They asked for grant capacity with a sliding scale, perhaps maybe forgivable loans. They asked for revolving loans with good interest rates. They know that in their future, they are going to need a whole lot more than what the state can provide for them or what they can provide for themselves. But they need something to get them started, to get them moving in the right direction. And it turns out their challenge is our challenge. It's my personal challenge, capacity, authorities, and money. It's a regional challenge, it's a planning district challenge, and it's the state's challenge. Really, it's all the state's challenges when it comes to coastal resilience. I talked about working with other partners, but there's a few things I like to call out. We were able this year to work with the Metro Washington Council of Governments to save a feasibility study that the Army Corps had planned and where a federal match was in place, but we were missing some of the non-federal match, by enabling Virginia to be a cost-share partner and chip in the last bit to get that study moving. So we do have a feasibility study going in Northern Virginia. I mentioned that we'd worked with the EPA, with NOAA, with NASA. We are also working with the Nature Conservancy on the Eastern Shore to strategize on ways in which we can develop coastal resilience and strategic locality adaptation so that communities who want to think about reinventing themselves and maybe even moving have a path to execute that based on the policy, law, and standards in the state of Virginia. And collaborating with science at Virginia Institute of Marine Science and ODU, we're part of a U.S. Climate Alliance, very modest grant, but it includes the states of New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, and North Carolina, looking at our ability to incorporate blue carbon into our coastal planning and better understand the needs of coastal wetland forest migration. We've also testified before Congress twice, and will testify again next week before the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Dr. Jerry Galloway's in the audience. He and I will be there together. Thank you, Jerry, sir. And we've worked very carefully, and this is critically important for those of you who work water quality in the room, with the Chesapeake Bay Act and the Water Quality Improvement Program to focus on the value of co-benefits and ecosystem services across the full spectrum of adaptation and protection. In speaking with Ann Swanson this morning, we agreed these two issues are inextricably linked. They must be done together. One does not overshadow the other. Resilience is critical to water quality. We have to do this together, all working to build capacity, which takes time. Director Andrews mentioned that at our May funding forum, we put together options to assist planning districts and to allow them to hear from entities directly. She talked a little bit about that. Of course, the Middle Peninsula went first. Louis sitting back there. Good morning, sir. However, we will plan similar local seminars with the Northern Neck, Accomack Northampton County Planning District Commission, and Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, tailored for what they want to talk about. Lastly, there are 4 things that are common to states that are making progress, and I want to share them today. Big picture. Number 1, state funding, state skin in the game. State prioritization of interest in this process. Number 2, strong philanthropic support for resilience to fill in the gaps. That is something that does not exist in Virginia. We have a lot of emphasis on water quality. We have a lot of interest on energy and mitigation. We have very little in the resilience world. 3, business community, collaboration, and sponsorship across the board. And 4, a strong, centralized, state-funded, and authorized collaborative process of some sort. Some states use their coastal zone management program. Other states are setting up different strategies, but authorized from the top down to focus on this issue. So as we lead into today's conference, again, planning, partnerships, and paying for it all these commonalities are a good fit. And I hope that you'll take away from the panelists and the moderators who have agreed to work these panels this morning some information that will be of great value to you in the future. Before I get started, though, and before we get started, I mentioned the Commonwealth had some standards to discuss, and to do that, I'd like to introduce Secretary Matthew J. Strickler, the Secretary of Natural Resources for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Matt is a native Virginian, as most of you are aware. He's also a passionate environmentalist and ardent advocate for the Commonwealth and for conserving all things related to natural resources, from the coast to the mountains. He works tirelessly to prepare and protect our coastal regions in particular, and to preserve our natural history and heritage with a focus on equity as we prepare for our climate change future. Secretary Strickler.